So for this week's assignment, we're focused on doing actually a rather simple procedure. We're just going to generate a single argument. Now it can be difficult to understand how to do this and also the purpose, so I'm going to kind of lead you through the how. But primarily the purpose of this is to demonstrate when we read a philosophical text, there's usually arguments all over the place, and the ability to identify what is being argued is absolutely crucial. So when we read a text, we tend to read kind of from the beginning to the end. In philosophy, we do that the first time, but we start to look for the parts of the arguments that are present. So big conclusions are made, small conclusions are made, and each of these is backed up with some sort of proof or evidence. And it's not evidence like it would be in, an empirical science or something like that. The evidence, we're looking for the reasons that the conclusion is true. And it's never, straightforward, here's my conclusion, here are the premises for the conclusion. Later in this class, in some of the modern authors, we will actually see that, but in most of the texts, the arguments require you to reconstruct them. So by generating our own argument, we work through the process to understand how reasons are given to a conclusion. And if you've read the text sort of closely, you'll remember that you can't prove whatever you want. It just doesn't happen. Yeah, we'll get into this whole, my opinions are mine and I can believe whatever I want, and that's wonderful, great for you, but you can't prove whatever you want. So there are good reasons for certain conclusions, and then in some cases you can't provide reasons for certain conclusions. And we'll see that more as we go along. But for this assignment, I'm not asking for anything really groundbreaking or anything like that. I'm just looking for a very basic argument structure. So I've written a quick one. It took all of 3 minutes, and the final assignment you're submitting on next Sunday should be essentially 4 sentences. That's what I'm looking for. The idea is that you post your draft of it or your ideas for it in the discussion. You get some responses and you submit the final argument. The argument isn't an essay, it's nothing. It's just your conclusion and then 3 points of proof. 3 or 4, whatever, it's fine. So for example, and I know this is hard for a lot of people because you don't know what the topic should be. Something interesting to you. Philosophy can mean all kinds of things. I'm not necessarily looking for a philosophical argument. So for example, my conclusion, or my thesis statement, whatever you want to call it, is that colleges should not require grades. This has some history. I went to the University of Santa Cruz, and once upon a time they didn't actually give grades. I don't have, my transcript has no GPA on it because I have no grades. They gave us what are called evaluations, so it's actually pages and pages of description about how you did in the class and things like that. So I'm kind of supporting this point. That's the whole point. So the conclusion, colleges should not require grades. Now, what are my reasons for thinking this? That's where the proof comes in. The support for the conclusion is my reasons for believing that, or the things I'm going to use to support that point. So first of all, and there's all kinds of things you could say here, I just came up with 4. Grades do not show the nuances of student achievement. Okay, pause it. That would be your second sentence. The first one is the conclusion, the second one is the first point of proof. And I can ask, well, what does that mean? And when I start to say, what does that mean? What do you mean, or how? How do grades not show the nuances of student achievement? I would simply reply, well, because, all they do is give you a number. They don't tell you what you could have improved. They don't tell you what you did successfully. And already there, I'm giving support for my support. So you can see how you can generate more support. So premise 1 already has support that goes with it. I'm not including that in the assignment. That's not the point. But you can see every time you ask why, somebody provides a reason, and then you can ask why again from that reason and ask for further support, and it just keeps going down. So far we have the thesis, or the conclusion, and 1 premise. Second premise, so again, thesis, colleges should not require grades. Why? Well, because success in many disciplines cannot be quantified. So the second premise is success in many disciplines cannot be quantified. Okay, what does that mean? If I wanted to explain that or describe it, or I was writing an essay on it, I would go off on some tangent like, well, I mean, it works in a discipline where everything is very much quantifiable. How much of the information did you learn? You got this many A's on this many quizzes, and the quizzes all reflect these kinds of things. But what about in philosophy? Well, it doesn't really work for philosophy because, sure, I can test your knowledge of Plato and how well you memorize certain things, but when it comes down to how you write essays and how you generate arguments, it's you do it or you don't. You do it well or you don't do it well. And I can assign general grades to that, but it's better if I give you some feedback. So you're missing some of the nuances here. And in this discipline, arguably lots of the liberal arts, so-called liberal arts, humanities, things like that, even law, it's better to sort of give feedback, critical advice, rather than simply a grade. So once again, back to our conclusion, colleges should not require grades. Again, I'll say, why? Well, third premise. Grades inhibit creative thinking or problem solving. Okay, sure, that's a way of proving my conclusion. So I can ask again, well, why? Well, they inhibit creative thinking or problem solving because they force us all to focus on quizzes or tests that are all quantifiable without maybe finding creative solutions to things. Here's an example, and please do not do this. I'm just giving you an example. Do not do this. My second year teaching at Solano Community College, I had a student that did not write essays or submit homework assignments. He wrote a sort of a novella or something. It was this ongoing it was a short story, but it was like the whole semester, and he'd submit chapters of it to me. And there was always things in there that had to do with the class. It was not philosophy. But we had lots of discussions about it, so he got the grade that he got. And it was an interesting endeavor for him, and he wouldn't have had the opportunity to do that once I saw what his purpose was. You can't really do that if you're trying to get an A or a B or a C. There's not a lot of room for solving problems in different ways. Not a great piece of support, but hey, it's in there. Okay, back to the conclusion. Colleges should not require grades. Again, why not? Well, there are better ways. There are better ways of measuring students' success or progress. For example, evaluations. Okay, there you go. So you have a conclusion and you have 4 points of support. Some are better than others. And for the purposes of this assignment, that's all we require. Now, I can criticize each of these points. I can give you reasons why they're not good. I can also offer more pieces of information that maybe make them stronger. If you looked at the appendix that was submitted with this chapter, you'll notice that this is the best way to start writing an essay, because you already have the structure, you already know what you're going to say. You have the main point is the thing you're trying to prove, and each premise is a piece of support that will be used to prove that. But the premises kind of sit out as arguments in themselves. You have to justify each of them, and the justification is where the essay writing comes in. If you compose an essay in this fashion, you start out with the argument rather than just start writing, you're going to write it a lot faster because you're going to know exactly where you are and where you need to be. And you can also control the size of the paper. If you had 3 points or 4 points for one thesis, that's anywhere between a 5 and an 8-page paper. If you did it properly and you had, sources and maybe gave some evidence to support your points. If you want to make a longer paper, maybe you have 2 conclusions, or you have 2 conclusions that lead to a bigger conclusion, and each of these 2 conclusions has, 2 or 3 points of support. Now you can kind of see how books are written. You have this general idea, and it's broken down into different arguments, and each of those arguments has sub-arguments. It makes it really easy to write. It's just a matter of understanding how to compose an argument. So we're only doing this 1 week. You're not doing anything else with this argument, so don't make it your baby. Don't make it a personal thing. It just needs to get done. And I can help you find topics if you'd like. You can also ask in the discussion board. That's what it's for. But I cannot emphasize the ease with which you can write an academic essay if you start with the argument. You just start with the thing you want to prove and the things you're going to prove it with. And if you're brainstorming, you can come up with all kinds of ideas and sort of run a few around and say, this one's not as good as this one needs too much support, this one's, I made it up, it's not going to work, this one's contentious, this one I have all these reports about it, there's all these statistics I can use, all kinds of things. So the more support you have, the better your argument. And also, if there's a problem with one of your premises, as said in the glossary, or the appendix, if one of your premises turns out like to be unprovable, or maybe it's based on information that was false and you didn't know that, you can simply remove it from your paper and the whole structure is still there. You just have to fit something else in that slot, so add a different premise. If you've written it properly, it's very much just a section you take out, but everything else in there is the same. You change the introduction a little bit and maybe the conclusion, but you don't have to rewrite the whole essay. A lot of students aren't taught how to compose an essay, so they start writing and then they fill up the number of pages. But if there's a problem with it, rewriting it you just have to write another paper, and nobody has time for that. So focus more on structure. Structure is key. The content is changeable. You can always change what's in there. Just worry about the structure.